extent that I can to answer your question. If I don't have an answer, I can get you an answer in short order. But with that, who's first? Corey.
Concerned about genetically modified organisms, three concerns. I wonder what you folks are doing to prevent contamination, GMOs contaminating other crops. Prevent the overuse of pesticides, because the seeds they get growing, they tend to get a lot of pesticides. And also to support sustainable non-GMO farming. What are you folks doing in that area?
Okay, Corey's questions, for those that didn't hear, the first part was concerning drift from GMO crops. The second part was about regulating pesticide usage overspray.
Yeah, they tend to use a lot of pesticides when they're growing the GMO seeds.
And the third part was, what is the department doing to work with
sustainable non-GMO farming?
We can get into a definition of terms, but we won't because we don't have the time. On the first part, biotech, GMOs are regulated by the federal government. We don't do it at a state level. It's not done at the county level. It's done at the federal level. And we're told as a state government what's safe to be farmed. And then we support agriculture. We support all agriculture at the Hawaii Department of Agriculture. If we're told it's safe to farm, we don't and can't discriminate. We assist. And so that's the first part. The drift part, the federal government tells us if there's a concern with drift. Now, I know that there are others that doubt, say, the research that the federal government uses, but that, at the state level, that's what we have to use. That's what we use. We go with their guidelines.
You can argue with them a little bit, yeah.
Excuse me?
You can argue with them a bit.
You argue with science, and that means you have to have the scientists employed to do it, which is part of the problem with a small state like ours, a very small state. Having those kind of resources in the Department of Agriculture, I don't know that we ever have those resources. But that's the first part. The second part is on the proper use of pesticides. Now, I believe this is in reference to biotech companies.
When they're growing
because
seeds,
it seems to be in context for your first question. I've been around agriculture. I worked in plantation agriculture. I've been around small agriculturalists. I've done small agriculture. The biotech companies, in my observation, probably apply pesticides better than anybody else that I've seen in this state. And the reason for that is that they have the most to lose. So they do it by the label. We go by what the EPA tells us at a state level is safe to use. And my observation in the calibration of the equipment that they use, the type of equipment they use, it's all high-end equipment that they keep calibrated. They hire the best people to do it because they have the most to lose. Now, I know there's a conversation about that out there, but I can give you my observation, boots on the ground, watching people apply. Where we have a problem is with small agriculturalists. They cut corners. They don't really read the label. A lot of them are immigrant farmers. They have difficulty. We do education with them. But that's my observation. To the extent that we, at the department, because it's our regulatory side, could find out that somebody wasn't doing it according to the label, we would then move to regulate them and or prosecute them if we couldn't get them in line.
They are getting sued in Hawaii for
that's the first part. The department supports all agriculture. This October, I'm going to be the keynote speaker for the Organics Association. If you looked at the grant that was given out, it's going to have my name on the bottom, help secure money for recertification of agricultural farms that we can do here in the state. Because when HOPA went out, there wasn't anybody to do certification. The department has given that grant money to put that back in place. And we are looking now, I'm having conversations with the organic industry to house that inside of the Department of Agriculture. I'll have to have that conversation with Richard Ha, who's on the board, and his other board members, but that's the discussion that's being had. We support all agriculture. It's our intent, and we are following through with that intent. And that's the best I can offer you at this time,
Thank you
Corey.
for your answer.
You're very welcome. Yes? Richard.
Is there any plans to staff the import section of plant quarantine adequately such that they can actually process permits in a timely manner? I've had a permit with you guys submitted in 2005 that still has never been processed. They have not held any hearings for years to move stuff onto the new list. If we're moving from restricted A to restricted B, and I know the people there. I know they're totally overwhelmed. If you can put laws on the books and have laws there, at least put the resources in there to enforce them instead of just sitting there tying us up in knots.
I would give you the Clinton-esque, I can feel your pain. One thing you should know, I'm a political appointee. I've only been around in a year and a half, but that's just for context. So, but speaking specifically to your point, those permits, the aquatic permits that you're referencing, are done by specialists inside of PQ. And for reasons that were unsatisfactory to me, they haven't had an aquatic specialist for a long time. Now, in justice to everybody in the department, in the economic downturn, 40% of the Department of Agriculture were let go in one fell swoop. They did not plan the cuts. They told the department to plan for 10%. They cut it 40%, and we lost critical positions, including our aquatic specialists. And they never restaffed it. Now, going back, it's one thing to cut people in one fell swoop. It's fairly easy to do that. Most of the jobs inside the Department of Agriculture are specialist positions. You just can't get people off the street. So, the position descriptions that we use to hire the people, they're specialists. So finding people to come in and take the job, and state government wasn't seen as safe as it one time was. It's safe through recessions, it's a good place to work. I think 40% got let go. We are working, I personally are working on putting the aquatic specialist in. I sent several emails out this afternoon because I had inquiries. I was in communication with Neil Reimer, who's the acting administrator for plant industry and oversees PQ, about moving forward with hiring. We're actively recruiting. We're looking on campus in Manoa to find somebody who can be our aquatic specialist. But we're moving on it. I know that the department hasn't done a good job. That's sort of the context on that issue. But Kevin, we're actually working really hard to fill that position.
Glad to hear that.
We
and the proof of the pudding will be when I see you when you get it.
Exactly. And here's my card. Knows that again. Eric, excuse me.
Thank you, Deputy, for taking the question. Right now, our industry, we're in the procurement side, as you know. And what we understand is we did get the inspectors, and we do have the program funds in place. We wanted to know what's your position and the department's position on the biosecurity program, and how can we get that program started where it can start helping our industry?
Well, you're sitting next to the former chair of the House Committee on Agriculture, who's done a wonderful job in helping us rebuild the department. Cliff Suji, up in the front here. An excellent partner in agriculture. A number of those positions have been in place for years, but the branch manager there in trying to find the right talent to come in, it's sort of ties in with my answer to Kevin's question. We haven't found the people, so we're actually changing the PDs so we can hopefully find more people. And we've got Glenn Sakamoto, who works for Carol Okada, on campus recruiting people and telling the professors what classes they need to take so we can put those in. The department's commitment to the biosecurity program, as I was telling you a week ago, is strong, and we're committed. And I know that the former chair wants to hear that too. We are committed to that program. That program will be supported. Right? Chair Kokoban supports it. The department supports it. We'll make it happen. And we can continue to have that conversation because it's partnerships is how we make things happen in agriculture. Yes, Michael.
Thank you for coming out. What are you guys doing up on the state level to help open up career opportunities for young farmers that are looking to go inside of agriculture?
Well, let's see.
Considering, especially like here on the Big Island, when there's a very large number of people that own farms that prefer to go through more of a work trade opportunities instead of looking for serious people that are actually looking for an employment in agriculture.
You know, Director Dwight Takamini, when he was speaking at the end, when the directors were introducing themselves, was talking about the workforce development piece that we're doing. We have on the Hamakua Coast now a farmer training program that's ongoing, that somebody, say like yourself, or interest, they can get in, they go through that program, and then the department will recognize that if you wanted to apply for state land. We would recognize that as, you know, the experience to move forward. If you don't have a degree from this institution, we are trying to replicate that around the state. That's ongoing. The Agribusiness Development Corporation, which is part of the Department of Agriculture, is starting to put programs together for workforce development. The concern that we have, the concern that anybody that cares about agriculture across the nation, but specifically here in Hawaii has, is the mean age of our agriculturalists is 60, a bit best. We need to find the next generation, but we need to do it in such a way that we catch the best and the brightest, because, you know, the Department of Agriculture taught education in this state is vocational, but we need the best and the brightest. Agriculturalists today, as Richard Ha will tell you, need to be out there with their iPhone and their iPad, because they not only need to be doing the cultivation side and getting the crop, they need to be doing the marketing side and the transportation side. They've got to do it all. You've got to be the best and the brightest if you're going into ag, and that's who we're looking to attract. And there are programs that we're putting in place to do just that. Are you looking for a piece of land? Because I'll give you a card. I'll take you up on the challenge. Okay, thank you. Yes.
About the noxious weed list. I understand that it hasn't really been updated for 20 years or more. And more invasive species have come in. They are threatening ecology, they are threatening agriculture. There's a lot of problems with them, certainly. A lot of them haven't gotten onto the list. There's ones that have been removed, like strawberry guava, that are more noxious than anything else. And right now, from what I understand, is that the department is only using that list to decide who can enter into a cooperative agreement with the department. But you could get a lot more bang for the buck if you opened up the use of that, so that, you know, farmers, people could get grants to control some of these invasive species, and community groups could get permission from private property owners to go on their properties to do eradications and control. The only thing that's hanging it all up is that fifth criteria. You've got 4 criteria in that list, in order to be on the list, that basically are your weed risk assessment criteria, you know, growth, reproduction, and all of that stuff. And if every single one of the plants that made all 4 criteria were on the list, it would be a lot bigger list. But what hampers the whole thing is that 5th criteria, which limits the spread and distribution of these noxious weeds, so that the department doesn't have to enter into what they consider a losing battle. But you could have your cake and eat it too. And all you have to do is say that any plant that meets the first 4 criteria goes on the list, but only the ones that meet the 5th criteria as well can qualify for a cooperative agreement with the department. Then you're not sending mixed messages. There's a lot of people out there, if something's not on the list, they think it's not noxious. You know, they'll take it from one island to the other. And I have written numerous letters to the department making this suggestion. You don't even have to do any renumbering in your HAR. All you have to do is add that one little phrase, you know. And no one even called me back or wrote me back or told me why it's not a good idea or said they would put it on the the board agenda. And I think it's a really viable solution and a simple one that doesn't cost any money.
That decision rests with our SPRO, who's the head of our plant industry division.
I spoke to Kyle Luma. He liked the idea.
Neil Reimer, and Neil and I had a discussion about it several weeks ago. It wasn't in depth, it was in passing, but we touched on it and what we wanted to do with it. So, please, email me, and we'll start the conversation, and I'll take it to Neil on Monday. And
okay.
I've got scribes that will remind me of everything
Thank
to do.
you.
And we can take it from there. No promises, but we can take a look at it. Somebody will get back to you. Thank you for all your work in the community.
Thank you.
Margaret.
Yeah, just to go back a minute to the GMO issue, in terms of the federal preemption, there is labeling which they're working on the federal level, but in terms of health issues or containment or drift, our county charter, our county code, does permit that. There was an effort this past year to eliminate our jurisdiction in that way, but it was not, SB 727 did not pass. So I just want to clarify, you know, in terms of our island having some kind of say-so over what goes on or one farm being able to impact another, that I just want to, you know, I agree with you in terms of labeling issues, but not necessarily in terms of what one person has the right to farm in a way that would adversely affect the neighbor.
Yeah, there, Margaret, I will defer to USDA's legal department, which I understand is looking at both Bill 79 and Bill 2191 on Hawaii to see if they'll stand to a legal challenge, because it's never been challenged. You know, as a county, we did that with coffee and taro, but it wasn't challenged yet. And so that's, you know, it's the legality of it. And I stand back and wait because, again, at the state level, we take direction.
Right. There's one U.S. Supreme Court case, Maine versus Taylor, which does provide for the right for a state, or it would be local government, to take a position and not wait for some irreversible damage. So there is one case that does support the right where it is not supremacy or the Commerce Clause or anything else. There's no case to support supremacy on that basis.
We'll let the attorneys define the terms.
And who appointed the attorneys?
Yes.
All right, thanks for taking the time to meet with us. I just wanted to express my concern about the legacy of agriculture here. I live on old cane lands, and you know, I think most of the people here know that where the sugar was grown, where the pineapple was grown, the land's pretty much destroyed afterwards. And I feel like there's been real focus on export agriculture compared to producing locally and selling locally. And of course there's problems, which like farmers want to get as much as they can for their dollar, and consumers want to pay as little as they can. So there's always these challenges, but I just wanted to say if we could see a more sustained effort to encourage local production and local consumption through distribution networks, we could actually cut out the middlemen and have a better price for the farmer and a better price for the consumer. I feel like the GMO issue is kind of like a little Band-Aid, because if you're growing large monocrops year after year, exporting all the stuff, you're going to have problems. So one last way to deal with this would be to help with funding the College of Agriculture, which I'm not sure if that would be you guys, but they've lost most of their funding. I think they're about 37% of their original budget, or their high budget they had before, and they have 30% more students. So those farmers that we're trying to churn out now don't have the resources they need. Meanwhile, the staff is very well equipped. They're very knowledgeable people. I've talked with them. So if you can just kind of help make that happen however you could, that'd be great. And also, here's a parent for you.
All right.
It's the legacy of plantation agriculture. You know, the soils, as you probably well know, can be brought back fairly readily.
Yeah.
I mean, we have people doing it all over. The department's putting out ad campaigns now. I happen to be the administrator for market development, so I know we're putting them together to create demand for locally produced produce. You know, we can grow it, but we need the demand locally. So we have to build that demand because usually it costs us a little bit more to grow it here, so we have to entice people. The Ulupono Initiative did a market study that came out in December of 2011. They showed that 85% of the people in the state support local agriculture and would like to eat locally produced produce, but it breaks down to cost. So we need to do it in such a way that it's affordable, and if it's a little bit, if it costs a little bit more, we can create the demand by explaining to everybody how nutritious it is, how fresh it is, how it supports the local economy, how it supports a green Hawaii with small local farmers. So we're doing that, you know, if you, and the governor would love it, if you were to read his new Day in Hawaii and his agricultural renaissance, it's all about import rebuilding. So we put time in market development branch on exports, which is where they used to spend the majority of their time, and we're moving that over to trying to reduce local demand for local produce. So we're moving in that direction. So keep in touch. Tell me how we're doing. All right. Yes.
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment on what you just said there. I am a big proponent of eat local, buy local, but I will not support GMO crops to come off our island. So I would hope to see more organic crops grown on our island. Thank you.
Worse than GMO crops are the organic, unsprayed produce that come into our state that are probably the biggest intrusion of invasive species into our state. So if we can encourage these new efforts to grow things like kale and Swiss chard and things that people are paying big money for in Whole Foods, we have a great industry of buy local and things that can be organically grown here that don't have invasive species from there.
We do risk assessments on everything that's imported, so it drives our inspection services. And leafy greens that are organic are the highest risk, and we put a lot of attention there. We would like to promote the growing of more organic leafy greens in state, just because it takes away the risk potential of invasive species. That's correct. Yes.
Scott, I wonder if you could elaborate a little bit on that state position of coexistence with GMO and natural or eco or organic farming. Because it seems to me that that's been discussed endlessly, and it really doesn't work. In the sense that it's not like farmers are against farmers' home, but essentially GMOs are contaminating technology. It's been proved that over and over again. Even the major organic product companies in the United States are having all kinds of problems with contamination, and it's almost impossible to stop out. It seems to me you're making a choice here between technology that's chemical or a technology that is more natural. Obviously, it would be much more sustainable in the long run for the island. The things that kind of set the GMO apart as far as not being contaminated, using setbacks or things like that, downwinding that, they all require human responsibility. And over and over again, it doesn't work out. Simply, it doesn't happen. And people mean the best, but they take shortcuts, they cut corners. That whole fence post thing that they've been promoting so long in agriculture means nobody's going to set aside extra land and all that. So I'm wondering how you can preach coexistence at the same time realizing ultimately it won't be, because everything's in the lab. Everything's going to be tweaked and patented and genetically.
Broad question, but I'll see if I can answer. There's with an example. On the island of Molokai, set in the middle of the department's ag park, which is to a great extent utilized by biotech company, is a rather large organic farm, Kumu Farms. Grant Schul, I've known him almost my whole adult life, and he's been there. He has organic status. He's named as organic status the entire time. There's no cross-pollination, but it's what he's cropping. He's not doing corn. You know, he's doing papaya, and nobody else is doing papaya out there, and he's doing herbs, and he's doing leafy greens. And so there's not the cross-contamination. So it's almost a defining of terms about what we're talking about. But again, as the Department of Agriculture, we're told by the federal government what's safe in terms of setbacks and everything else. And the science, you know, because I read both sides of the issue. You know, I read the proponents and I read the detractors of biotech. You know, I think you need to read everything to really come away with something of an understanding. And both sides will cite science, you know, their own science. And so it's sometimes hard for, I'm not a geneticist, to discern, you know, what's going on there. But I do know that when I talk to, say, the dean of the College of Agriculture in Manoa, who's herself a geneticist, Dean Gollum, she tells me when I bring some of the, you know, studies in that get cited by the detractors of biotech, that it doesn't hold up to peer review. And so I'm waiting in the middle, but as a department employee, I'm told what is safe by the federal government, and that's how we move.
Well, my point is, I'm not a geneticist either, and I'm not going to throw research at you because I don't know that either. I have no idea. All I'm suggesting is an organic farmer is going to be contaminated no matter what. You know, he might have crops right now that are not genetic, he doesn't have to worry about, but in the future, most likely, all those crops will be tweaked somehow and in that genetic pipeline. So, you know, you're really putting one side here, you know, essentially eliminating one side or eliminating a smaller and smaller amount of what they can grow, depending on pollination and all that, of course, but it just seems like, you know, it just doesn't make sense. It sounds nice, coexistence sounds wonderful. I don't want any other farmer what to do, but in the administrations, this is a current model of genetic food stuff is Monsanto model. It's based on toxics and more toxics coming down the pipeline because of the weeds and all the things we know become resistant. So the future seems so obvious to me when we care so much on this island. We're so isolated about self-sufficiency in the future. How can we possibly be putting more toxics in and contaminating that, you know, that quality ecological agriculture that we have? Made my point.
You know, we'll wait for the science. The strongest science is a meta-analysis. When you take longitudinal studies and you combine all the studies and you get a meta-analysis, that's a definitive study. We don't have any definitive studies. So again, and I hear you, your concerns, and I'm not saying, you know, for you they're legitimate concerns. Others cite science where it's not a concern. But as an employee of the State Department of Agriculture, the federal government dictates. So, Fernando.
Would it be possible for the agriculture department staff to really look at the possibility to avoid GMO growing papaya by replacing the existing contaminated seeds with with seeds from Philippines, South America? They are seeds that will not have the expired or contaminated viruses and anything strong in genetics to improve the papaya exportation. Another concept that was brought out to my attention was that there are a number of Filipinos, families that they have been growing GMO papaya for 20 years, I say, in the islands. For them to be trying to stop the contamination of their own soil and try to experience on organic in another way. There is not continuing destroying their land with pesticides. I mean, this imminent discussion.
I'm having a hard time figuring out where to start on that one, Fernando, but I'll cite Eric Weiner, who does Calavo.
Like in the group, organic group, we have.
You're going to have to let me answer, Fernando. I really got it, but thank you. Eric Weiner, who runs Calavo, who processes GMO, also does Korean farming method on the Hamakua coast. So he has an alternative organic regime. He tried to do papaya organically, and he's a good agriculturalist. He couldn't pull it off, and it's the ring spot virus. So unless we can find strains that are resistant to the ring spot virus, you're going to lose that crop. He did, and so that's it. And defining contaminated, that's we have to define that terms where the soil's contaminated, the seed's contaminated. We're told, again, by the federal government that it's safe, and they've done the testing, so it's not contaminated. Certainly for the department, it's not contaminated. And
Semantic games.
touching on herbicides, that's conventional agriculture. So if somebody chooses to use conventional agricultural methods to do agriculture, that's supported by the department. If they're using it according to the label, they have every right to do that. The federal government says so. And that's the way, in this case, government is structured. Yes, in the back.
This is more towards market development and also towards government. I'm wondering if the state of Hawaii, the institutions such as prisons or schools that buy a lot of food in bulk, if they have any sort of preferential bidder treatment for local growers. Or if not...
Thank you for that question. No. But, yeah, I know. I felt the same way. I still do. We're working with the state procurement office to change that. The chair of the Department of Agriculture, Russell Kokobun, who's a Big Island resident, has a unique view of state government, having been a state senator and having been chair of the Senate Committee on Agriculture. He has a wonderful overview of agriculture. He's been working on that issue to open it up because, yes, it makes perfect sense that a market like the Department of Education would start buying local produce. Yes, and Department of Public Safety be buying. Yes, it should happen. It will happen. We're working on it. You can thank Chair Kokobun. Yes, Mike.
Regarding the federal guidelines on pesticides and so forth, and regarding the state responsibility to take their own initiative on things that might be of major concern. The one I can think of is the honeybee issues. It's becoming more and more determined in Europe and in Canada, and now in the United States. They're working on legislation to control the use of neonicotinoids.
Right.
What has the state done in anticipating the need there? Because we're losing bees at a fantastic rate.
Well, the science isn't there yet, as you know, Mike, because you're paying attention. We have started an apiary branch inside of the department. Danielle Downey, she's right here in Hilo, runs the apiary program out of Hilo. She is our resident bee expert. She's looking at the research. She tells the office of the chair that it's not definitive yet, so we have no planning for that. Again, that will need to come down from the federal government because it's contextual. And context does not prove causation, as you well know. So because you've got all of these things happening around these particular pesticides, are they really the cause or is it something else? And again, having worked for state government, and state government in Hawaii, we don't have the kind of resources to do that. We're going to wait for the feds. They're a long way off. we're out doing other things. We're trying to create market demand and make sure procurement gets fixed. But Mike, you know how to get a hold of me, keep in touch. Questions? Back to anybody else? I already got Michael. In the back of the room.
Sorry, Charlie, I think it's a name back. I just got a question on the federal guidelines and stuff that comes down concerning agriculture. I know a lot of the testing and regulation that they have on some of the stuff that the FDA and they approve. I'm concerned perhaps maybe the ones that they have approved for the federal government on the mainland, maybe you don't understand about the volcanic soil of Hawaii and how easily things tend to go through and end up in our water. So in the state, when you're talking about the GMO regulations and what's being talked about as far as what's okay GMO federal government-wide, is that the same okay that GMO Hawaii-wide? Because we're different. We get volcanic soil, things run through a lot quicker, things show up in our water a lot faster. Is the state addressing that?
Well, you know, for me, those you can conflate two issues. Working through the soil profiles about pesticides as opposed to, gene splicing, biotechnology. You don't really have going through the soil. But the answer, yeah, pesticides get sprayed and they work through the soil profile and you get it in the water table. But you're not finding any genetic material down there.
Has anybody tested that? Do we know that for sure? I mean, because GMO will be inside the plant material. So if us as organic farmers are using a compost, that molecule will end up back inside the crop. Maybe not with every single GMO, but we don't know the difference between what is what and how as farmers are we able to then make that decision. And I mean, if I lose my organic certification because I pick up one from a dump and get stuck inside there that 5 years from now they can determine it's GMO, how am I supposed to set my business up so that I can project being in business 5 years from now?
Two things. One is, the answer that I was giving you was the best one that I have in trying to understand your question. And the second one is yes, it's the federal government. And yes, even though we have a unique ecosystem here in the state, the federal rules still carry. They carry with pesticide usage, they carry with biotechnology. Right. So the answer to your specific question is yes.
Well, like one government, as far as regulation goes, the state has, as well as the county on top of the state, has the opportunity to set the standard higher than the federal government.
No, we do not. And that's, we covered that a little bit earlier. The federal government is fine. And, it's a heated issue, and I know there's concerns. The federal government sets the standards. The state does not. The county does not. Now, the county can try. Home rule, you can try. But you have to pass the legal challenge. If you're challenged in court, is it going to hold up? Now, taro and coffee weren't challenged, but they're about to be challenged. So it's all open. And again, they'll then tell the department what we can do, and we'll do that because that's our role. We serve sort of an intermediary role here. We support agriculture in this state to increase vitality, to increase food self-reliance, to help agriculturalists just like yourself. But when it comes to the regulatory side, that they inform us as to what our position is going to be. In the back.
You mentioned this island will be 100% dairy self-sufficient.
The state. If
the state will be 100% dairy self-sufficient. Probably a lot around this island. I understand that the current dairy on this island is one operating. There's 700 acres of GMO corn to feed the cows that really like to graze on the grass. I believe the taxpayers subsidize that GMO corn. Now we look at this 100% statewide dairy totally self-sufficient. Are we taxpayers going to continue to subsidize GMO feed for cows that really don't want it? Or are we going to go to raising cows in an organic method?
Well, as a matter of fact, I don't know, I don't understand how we would be subsidizing the dairy that's growing the corn, but we have two different models of dairy starting up. The one that's starting up on Hawaii is going to be grass-fed. It's a New Zealand regime They're doing improved pastures that are irrigated. They're going to maintain the nutrition in the grasses at a very high level. They'll only grain the cows when they're being milked. The rest of the time, they're out in the pasture. And so it's mostly a grass-fed regime. The dairy here on the Big Island Dairy Group is going with a forage regime, and they mix their feeds, and corn is one of them. And they grow the corn on site. And that's what we need. If it works, it's been done before. All the milk that's coming in is being fed corn. So
organic milk is not being fed corn.
Well, I understand that.
And I think organic milk is influenced because the nearest organic dairy in Hawaii is 2,500 miles away. So don't tell me that my organic milk, which is not good fresh milk because it has to be super pasteurized the last time for the shipping and storage. And that's why I'm very interested in seeing organic, as you just mentioned, New Zealand. We visited there in New Zealand. Fantastic. Totally grass-fed, totally rotated. And as I'm saying, I believe the taxpayers subsidize that 780 GMO corn facility for that dairy.
We don't subsidize.
You what?
We do not subsidize it.
They receive no government money for their feed supply for the cow. With the feed subsidy bill that the legislation just put in, they can apply for it. But as anybody else that does livestock in the state can apply at the same time. But until they do that, which they haven't done yet, they're getting those subsidies, but they would get it along with everybody else. I hadn't finished my statement when you sort of jumped on it. And this isn't, it doesn't need to be adversarial. I'm just trying to explain the conditions that exist. I didn't create the conditions, but I'll explain them to you as to what's happening. So, do you want more information on the dairy, or do you want to talk later about dairies? No, I jumped in because you said it was corn, feed, and organic milk, and that was not true.
I don't think I said organic. If I did, I misspoke. Did I say organic? No, I didn't. The majority of the milk coming into this state, the vast majority, all the milk except for the milk on this island, is imported from California. It's Class C milk. It's double pasteurized. It's lousy milk. And that's because in this state, in our generation, we went from 24 dairies to 2. We have 2 dairies, both of them on this island, and both of them were in bad financial condition about to go out. We would have gone to all imported milk. We're changing that around. We have 2 different regimes, the one New Zealand one, which won't be exclusively grass-fed. We'll have some corn, and it will probably be GMO corn, because finding seed of anything other than biotech corn is exceedingly difficult and expensive, and they're all cost-conscious. And we've got the forage regime that's being used here in Ocala on the Hamakua coast, and it's successful. I mean, if someone has a concern about it, which I'm sure there's some people in the room that do, they'll have to go with organic milk, which is their choice. But right now, it's nutritious milk, and it's better than anything that's being imported. And we're doing it locally with local feed. The reason we don't have 24 dairies anymore is because they couldn't afford the feed bill, and they went out. It's why we lost piggeries. It's why we lost our poultry industry. So our challenge at the department is to come up with regimes to do feed crops so that we can be competitive again. And that we're working hard on it. We have experiments around the state, and we have a feed mill that we're putting in here in Hilo to try to address that situation. But, Bob, I welcome the conversation, and I know you have more questions, and we'll let some other people take the questions. Is it a papaya question, Peter?
No. It's a general question.
Okay.
If we're bringing in 70-80% of this food here, and the average farmer is getting to be 60 years of age, and the sugar cane is gone. I mean, I'm an organic farmer, I'm a conventional farmer, and a GM. It seems like all these things we hear from, that I've heard from you tonight, is maybe I've got my nose too deep in papaya and I'm not, I'd like to help everybody, but can we get a little bit more information from you guys? Can we have more roundtables where we learn about it and, you know, like this? This is a good forum. So that maybe we could, you know, pivot a little bit. Not everybody has to stay in papaya all their life. Can we do some interesting crops after papaya? Can we, you know, maybe steer a little bit of that acreage here or there? And I'm not talking down one or the other. And there's not a surplus of money. 3 years ago, a lot of us were losing money. So what can you do to work with that, with these new markets that we're talking about? What can the governor help us do to promote that? I know we talked about markets, but there's a lot of land out there, and we don't know what crops to plant because the soil's a little rocky. I mean, I've got a friend in the Mainland, he plants 700 acres a day. That's not uncommon in 10 hours, 70, 80, 90 acres an hour. Over here, you can't hardly move 5 feet, you know, there's the rocks or something. So a little bit more implementation so we can grow the food here. And different types of food, the leafy crops or whatever. That's kind of what I'm talking about.
It's getting the hook. I'll give Tim a quick answer. I don't specialize in. I've started the conversation with Chancellor Straining, who is a huge supporter of agriculture. He's trying to grow his school of agriculture back into existence. What we need, what you're speaking to, is an extension service for the 21st century. That's what we need to help us figure out what we need to do out there and how, if we're changing crops. And that doesn't exist really anymore in Manoa. It's morphed over the years, and it's nowhere near as efficient as it is. The Chancellor here for the Big Island wants to do, so he's not in competition with his friends in Manoa, outreach. And we've started a discussion on that. Here on campus, we've been meeting every month for several months now. We're starting to bring in industry people to add to that conversation. Jeff Milrose, who works for the Mayor Kanoi on agricultural issues, myself, Chancellor Straining, and the Dean of the School of Agriculture, Bruce Matthews. And we've started that conversation. So we are going to start bringing in the agricultural community to have that conversation and to attempt to grow outreach so we can assist agriculturalists here on this island diversify and move out. And growing demand, the department's putting back the market analysis and news. We used to be able to analyze in the department everything that moved around the state, what was growing and how it moved, so we could track it. So we had a scorecard of what we actually did produce. And we could give analysis news so agriculturalists could look to see if they could be cost competitive at price point on certain commodities. That got rifted in the last downturn. Everybody in that department was let go. The whole floor was empty. When it got repopulated, I had the first office on that floor. But we're putting that back into play. The combination is the best answer I can give you your question. Probably one of my more difficult questions for you. Thank you. I think we're done. Eric.
Thank you for your question.
Yeah. If I could jump in on what you were saying, I think yes, statistically we need staff because it measures not only what we produce, but what we also import and compete against.
Correct.
I think yes. I think Dean Matthews, the chancellor, is right on. I think we need to brainstorm and challenge that and get everybody involved.
Yeah.
I think yes, forums are good. I think one of the things going back to biosecurity, bear with me. Biosecurity program as an import replacement segment. It measures everything that is coming into the state, the high risk stuff. We have room, probably, everybody in this room, personally how I feel, we have room for everybody to produce agriculture. Edible and non-edible. We can take the statistics, they can tell us what we should be producing, what we have to produce because of high risk. There's room for everybody.
I agree.
I think if the department takes the lead, we need leadership there. And the new day will come.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you all for coming. Said that to answer your question. If I don't have an answer, I can get you an answer in short order. But with that, who's first? Corey.